Почитувани гледачи, ја следите емисијата Македонско издание, која што повеќе од 26 години ве информира и забавува. Јас сум Победа Пискачева, продуцентот, уредникот, монтажерот и водителот на оваа емисија, која се надевам и денеска ќе го задржи вашето внимание.
За професионално дизајнирање на веб сајтови по поволни цени, барајте ги TJ Hosting.
Во денешнава емисија ќе ви го прикажеме материјалот што го снимивме на 19 ноември 2025 година од премиерното прикажување на долгометражниот документарен филм Јанза во Торонто. Организиран во партнерство на Македонскиот филмски фестивал и Друштвото за канадско-македонско наследство во Торонто, овој настан привлече голем интерес со оглед дека филмот го опфаќа животот и делото на еминентниот поет и филолог Blaže Koneski. Режиран од познатиот документарист Никола Т. Калајџиски, филмот црпи инспирација од дневникот по многу години на Конески и нуди кинематографско прикажување на неговиот живот и неговото културно наследство. Низ гласовите на водечки академци, лингвисти, книжевни научници и странски македонисти, Јанза го открива и монументалното значење на делото на Конески во кодификацијата на македонскиот литературен јазик и помалку познатите интимни димензии на неговата личност. Во продолжение да проследиме исечок од филмот Јанза и обраќањето на професорот Кристина Крамер по неговото прикажување.
Во определено време на денот доаѓаше доктор кој што му ставаше инjekција, инсулин. Тој добиваше една определена доза секој ден, ама тој ден може би поради разочарување или неможност да дојде да си купи храна за тој ден, тој фактички ништо не јадел. И се предизвика она што медицински се нарекува инсулинска кома. На таков начин почина осамен, притрчале луѓе, се обидале ова, навикнале за помош и така натаму. По раскажувањето на Трека Стаматовски, тој притрчал прв, потоа ги викнал неговите неблиски роднини, од световците беше доктор, и потоа дошли и други луѓе. Меѓутоа, сето тоа се одвило набрзо. Тој почина.
И оваа битка требало да ја водам, да ја бијам со денови, со крвави раце до рамена, со крвави нозе до колена, до премалување. Дури не се испитам сосем, дури не дојдам до крајот, дури не секнам како бунар што секнува полетен пек, за да ја сетам последната желба, само никој да не ја види мојата смрт.
Who was Blaže Koneski, and let's talk about his great achievements. Pivotal role in the codification of the Macedonian standard language, development of modern Macedonian literature, establishment of the institutions that promote an active intellectual life. Those contributions as linguist, scholar, and writer fundamentally shaped the development of the Macedonian language and the direction of Macedonian poetry. Critics, as somebody mentioned here, tried to assess which is better, which is the bigger, Koneski the linguist or Koneski the poet. And I thought that this quote that I found of his when I was working on something about him really captured that he was both of them simultaneously. He wrote, when he was writing the history of the Macedonian language in 1965, this book of mine was written in the outdoors, in the fresh air, with the intoxicating smell of grass and pine. I hope something of that pure beauty has been passed on in it. So when he's a linguist, he's thinking as a poet. When he's a poet, he's thinking as a linguist. There is something very lovely in that. Next question. So what does it mean to codify a language Who gets to do it, and why was it so difficult for Macedonian until 1944? So I'm just going to tell you, take my word for it today, it's a big deal to have a written standard language used in all spheres of society. There are more than 3,000 languages in the world that can't make that statement. I'm not going to give you my lecture on codification and the whole history of the alphabet. You can invite me back for that. I just want to say very briefly, as the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, they go, oh my God, she's going back to the 19th century, we're all in trouble. No, trust me, 7 minutes. As the Ottoman Empire is falling apart in the 19th century, some areas of the empire in the Balkans are being granted status as semi-liberated nations. And that includes Bulgaria and Serbia. There was a lot of ongoing discussion about what the Slavic languages emerging from those years of Ottoman, and I might add Austrian domination, what were those Slavic languages going to look like? These dialects running down the Balkan Peninsula go through waves of being closer together and further away from one another. And so there are different centers of closeness and then periods of further dissimilation, but there really is a continuum top to bottom. What's important for Macedonia is what was happening in Bulgaria between 1840 and 1870. Bulgaria was trying to codify its language, and Macedonian, as sort of the poor cousin, is also trying to be part of this conversation. Articles in the 1850s in Bulgarian newspapers are writing, we understand Old Church Slavonic better than we understand those dialects of Macedonia. The Macedonians contributing to this discussion are saying, we could have a compromise if something were taken that contributed elements of both. Bulgarian intellectuals, however, there were these two standards that developed really in the Middle Ages of a literary tradition in the northeastern Macedo-Bulgarian area around Trnavo, and the southwestern area around the Ohrid school. So we had these two literary traditions from the Middle Ages, one in the northeast, one in the southwest, that were maximally different. And the Bulgarians decided to standardize around the northeastern Trnavo dialects. And the Macedonian intellectuals basically said, we're taking our dialects, we're going home. And they began trying the hard work of still under full Ottoman control to develop their own language. By 1878, Bulgaria had established its own exarchate, which meant it had its own autocephalous church. So Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece by 1878 each have their own church, they have their own literary language, they have political independence, and you know what they all want? More territory. And what's that territory going to be? The last remaining Ottoman territories of Macedonia. So while everyone is trying to suppress Macedonia and make the Macedonians feel like they belong to that other group, the Macedonians are trying to create their own language. They're writing grammars, they're writing dictionaries, and the fullest evocation of what that language would be was, as you heard here, the book Za makedonskite raboti by Krsta Misirkov. That book was published in Sofia. It was rounded up by the police, and the entire edition was burned. Not the entire edition. A copy was in the Sofia National Library. And at some point, Koneski got to see that when he was a student. So the seeds of Krsta Misirkov's vision of a Macedonian standard based on those West Central dialects was a continuum that we hear that survives into the work of codification in the 1940s. The Comintern, the Communist International of 1934, declared that Macedonians had the right to their own separate identity and their own separate literary language, their right to exist as a separate people. Therefore, aligning the Macedonian separatist aspirations with the Communist Party that carried it, if you will, across the finish line. During World War II, Macedonia is, of course, partitioned again. Macedonian is illegal in Bulgaria, it's illegal in Greece, it's illegal in Albania. Between the wars, it had been illegal in South Serbia, aka what was to become the Republic of Macedonia, but it was allowed as folk literature or dialect literature. So the plays of Vasily Ilyovsky, of Begalka, the plays of Anton Panov, Pechalbari, they had been performed on the stage in Skopje and in, I might add, Bulgaria as dialect literature. However, as Koneski says, during the war, Macedonia was functioning as the literary language of pamphlets, underground newspapers, and early collections of poetry. The proclamation you heard here by ASNOM, the Antifascistsko Sobranje za narodno osloboduvanje na Macedonia, the Anti-Fascist Assembly for the National Liberation of Macedonia, declared in the second Elim-Den, we know what the first was, 1903. The second is the declaration that Macedonia has the right for its independence as a people, as a language, as an ethnicity. At that ASNOM meeting, they said they were going to form a commission to standardize the language, which means creating that super dialect that becomes the literary language that everybody gets to write in. They asked for scholars, writers, anyone who thought they could contribute to kind of apply for this commission. Blaže Koneski is 22 years old, recent doctorate, so he had the most recent and the best training as a Slavic philolog, and he got invited to be part of this commission. He goes, and I don't know if you were ever a young person at a meeting with old people. Old people really don't like to hear what young people have to say. And Blaže was kind of this young buck coming in, and he was pissing people off, and they wanted to bring in Russian linguists to help codify the language. They wanted to use archaizing principles, and Blaže's like, I'm having none of this. Like, I wasn't brought here for this, and he leaves. That first commission fails. Koneski is brought back, and they follow the principles of Krsta Misirkov that they're going to base this language on the West Central dialects. So, what's a dialect base and what do you do with it once you got it? You can't use every feature of every dialect and then say you're going to have a common language. And the moment at which it was codified, Aegean Macedonia had been lost to Macedonia. Pirin had been maybe lost. There was all this talk that there might be a unified Macedonia, and that commission was trying to figure out where the political center was, because the Communist Party was saying there's going to be a Balkan Federation. They're saying we're going to bring all the Macedonians together. So when they're trying to come up with an alphabet, they're trying to figure out what are the political implications of the alphabet. So we moved from dialect-based to alphabet. What the commission did was said, look, there are going to be some letters that are going to be really tricky, but let's deal with what we can deal with first, and then we're going to worry about the problem areas. They established 25 letters, and then said, okay, now let's deal with the trouble. K, G, N, L, Y, Z, and what to do about that. Is it a vowel? Is it not a vowel? The letter schwa. That letter schwa exists in Bulgarian. It's the only Slavic language to have a letter in its alphabet. That sound occurs in many Macedonian dialects, but it does not occur in the West Central dialect. So Koneski says, we've picked a dialect base. If we start going, but this dialect has a ch, like in Northern Macedonia, and this one has an we are fracturing the dialect base from the beginning, and we're not creating unity. Koneski won that argument, and the Macedonian Standard Language does not have a schwa. Everybody with me now? Okay, so that's where we are. Now, we're not going to worry about the biggest problems of the agreement. We've sorted out our alphabet. So, why did the answers to these questions become flashpoints in the 1990s? So the debate about the widespread Serbian influence, because schwa was not adopted, Macedonia was you have to remember at the time of codification, Macedonia was viewed as the least literate of the Slavic peoples. 70% of the population couldn't read. And so part of the argument was that if we take letters, people already knew some of the letters from Serbian, the letter J, for example, we could get to literacy faster. Macedonia was part of Yugoslavia. Serbo-Croatian was the language of the army. It was the common language. If you wanted to go to medical school in Macedonia, you had to read medical books in Serbian. There was not Macedonian capacity yet. So there was influence of Serbian at the time of codification. In the 1990s, actually beginning in '88, people began accusing Koneski and the codifiers of purposely Serbianizing the language. As multi-parties came into being and the hegemony, if you will, of the Communist Party was lessened, people wanted to sever the legacy of Macedonia from the Communist Party. There were articles in the literary magazine of the newspaper that was ongoing called The Tribunal of the Macedonian Literary Language. And it contained virulent attacks against the standard language and ad hominem attacks against Koneski personally. One of the nationalist political parties had as its political platform that they would bring schwa back. These new multi-party resurfacing then raised nationalist tensions, including attacks on the legitimacy of the Macedonian ethnicity and language. Anti-communist nationalists accused the academic and political establishments of Serbianizing literary Macedonian, and these establishments in turn pointed out that what they were then spouting as their political platform had been the official Bulgarian line all along, and they accused these nationalists of being Bulgarophiles and Serbophobes. That's what happened then. So how does it come back again? In recent years, Bulgaria has taken on the mantle, in case you hadn't noticed, they've taken on the mantle from Greece of inhibiting Macedonia's full integration into Europe. It continues to make claims against Macedonia's legitimacy as a country, as an ethnicity, with its own language. I personally got to escort the Bulgarian consul out of a conference that I was at because he was claiming all of Macedonia as Bulgarian. There's really a brawl. I thought Victor was going to punch him out. Yupter Georgievsky was one of the loudest voices against Koneski and the language codification during the 1990s. He was Macedonia's vice president from January to October of 1991, and he was prime minister from 1998 to 2002. There's a very funny graffito about him, but I will tell somebody out in the courtyard later. I can't say it in public. He advocated for the country's independence. He was one of the founding members of Vomero Diplomanet, but he later split from the party, and like many Macedonians, he obtained Bulgarian citizenship in 2006. He is now a leading advocate for Bulgarian rights in Macedonia and an increased Bulgarian media presence in Macedonia, while in Bulgaria, those things are still not happening. A headline from June this year states, "The Bulgarian parliament stands behind Lukto Georgievsky and the Bulgarians of North Macedonia." So this brings us back to foreboding. This movie is staking a claim for the legitimacy of Koneski's legacy. It is staking a claim for the legitimacy of the Macedonian language as it was codified in the historical moment in which it was able to be codified. And it's also staking a claim for Koneski's role, not only as a leading voice for Macedonia, but a Macedonian patriot who wanted to use his talents for his people. As he wrote in one of his first poems, which I would like to, this little excerpt I'd like to end with now, which is from his 1948 collection, Zemljata I Ljubovta, My Country and Love. I koga sega pesna mi zreje, znam komu ke ja rečam, na moj narod što divno peje, što peje zvezdena večer. And now when my song ripens, I know to whom I'll tell it, to my people who sing in splendor, who sing in the starry night. Thank you.
Канадското македонско место во Торонто на своите станари им нуди угодно живеалиште, хармоничен живот и одлична услуга. Побарајте ги на 416-755-9231.
Почитувани гледачи, тоа е се што подготвивме за оваа 440-та емисија на македонско издание. Ви благодарам за вашето ценито внимание. До нашата следна средба. Пријатно и довидување.